This is IBM Museum. And with the Model 60 still on the bench behind me, I want to go through and test, well, first clean the remaining MFM controller adapters I have and go through and test them on this system, including an adapter I have in a second Model 60 unit. I mean, I've got the hard drive and everything else, but rather than even fire up that unit, it's probably good for me to go through and to test that board just to make sure that it works ahead of firing up that unit in the future. Of course, I have a little bit of archiving and things like that I want to do on this machine. I want to make sure what the battery level is for holding that configuration, so I just don't all of a sudden lose that. I get a battery swapped in at the appropriate point and keep the configuration of the system. But let me get turned around and get the internal webcam off, and just to kind of show a little bit of what I got. And of course, immediately I'll go through and set the adapters aside that I've gone through and previously tested. I've got a working unit that I'm going to get sent back out. Just got delayed in doing that, but I'll get that mailed back today in the original anti-static wrap that he had sent me his adapter that turned out bad. We do have the original MFM controller that was on this small 60 that will ultimately go back in place. And I've got to go through, I've got my little lens duster that is an easy way to remove dust a lot of time. Just want to make sure that you don't build up any static or anything else from the brushes that would otherwise damage it. And for this later unit, it's not, we don't see the a little cap basically put on one of the chips that IBM did. The earliest version of the MFM controller, they had a almost like just a coating that they put on there that saved or protected the chip, was the thought, from static damage. And the reason I kind of glanced over is I wanted to, I do have an adapter. In fact, I don't even need to delay. I think I've got it at hand. I can quickly pull it out to demonstrate. Now, and I need to get pictures done of this. In fact, there'll be a testing at the appropriate point, but this is actually the equivalent of the desktop model for the, Model 60 was the Model 50. And in particular, the Model 50 that they call the 021 submodel, that had an MFM drive that was proprietary, didn't work on any other unit, proprietary connection that, of course, most of those drives are failed. I do have some models around that are still working. And I've got a later version of this adapter. This is the early version. I have to get some pictures. This would ultimately be the same equivalent to what these MFM controllers, like the early version of this MFM controller for the Model 60. And this is a chip that has that little protection. It's got a little, kind of like a little shield. I don't know if that's just was something that they could go through and squash down that liquid, but going through, and it kind of sealed all the pins and everything else. And the reason that was said was that it was to protect that chip from being damaged by just a static that was around. It was very sensitive to static damage. And as it is, I don't have any of the early versions of the Model 60 that has that same chip on it. And I've done the the page of information on the MFM controllers showing that. We do have a picture of it at the Arden tool, but I'd like to go through and to have one for reference at some point. So if anyone's aware of where something like that is, please let me know. And we have, of course, I showed this adapter on the previous one. This is going to be a lot of cleaning for, presumably like an insect damage. I don't think that is, I don't think that's mice or anything like that getting in. And as I explained, if you have these, and what's really strange is being in the top slot 8, being nestled in there, and typically all these IBM put these cables in and everything else. But who knows? I may have had with a detached cables or something else, and had that to where just spiders or something else. Generally, you want to know when you clean up, you want to know what the material is on the circuit board that you're trying to clean. But I'm going to just try some denatured alcohol. I don't think I'll need to use vinegar, but I'll be able to check this for corrosion and things like that after I go through and clean. As always, with the in addition to the dusting of the original adapters in there, I'm going to need to clean out that black goop. And at some point here, I'll get to going through and cleaning out the black goop inside the case here. And of course, that stains hands and everything else. Who knows? I might try and get some plastic gloves to clean that a little bit better. And I do have to tag these. I've got my Sharpie. I've got a pad that I can do, and just to keep these separate. And once they're clean and they look a little bit more identical, to mark them of what the placement was of those. And then lastly, and I've already tagged it as the second 60. This adapter does not really need all that much cleaning, looks in pretty good shape, but we do want to go through and test for operation of this. So I'm going to go through, as I said in the past, I wish I could go through and be as, have a production quality that I could go through and just like fast forward and just, but I'm going to be going through and I've got other things going on, but I'm going to go through and start working on cleaning these, and I'll just go through and pause and resume the video at the point where I'm a little bit further along and ready to go through and test and to show these adapters when they're cleaned. So I don't know how much elapsed time that was, maybe an hour, I don't know. But let's get turned around again. I've gone through and gotten the adapters cleaned up pretty good. I've got the original set up to the side. We've already seen that working. I went through this as, of course, the worst one. The one that had, I think, what is ultimately spider. Just the egg balls and everything else that the spiders produce. I think was probably nesting in on on one of my units, and happened to go through and just the denatured alcohol just didn't seem like it would cut that. I'd have to go through and just get it moved away, actually just scraping it like with my fingernail and stuff like that. I've got an X-Acto blade there as well that I was very careful with for cleaning the pins. Now you don't want to go through and bend any of these pins out of alignment or have it bump an adjacent pin, because they're of course, very close together. There's still some discolorization. I'm not really worried about moisture necessarily, but in that byproduct of assembly insect level, you'd be worried about a little bit of acidic base, it would go through, and where it would be placed in would go through and corrode around that or cause some sort of galvanic response with the metal. Um, and I've just gone through and I've cleaned it at this point as much as I think is necessary. And I mean, I want to go through and try it. And of course, you want to make sure that it's you don't have any moisture on there. The denatured alcohol is it removes the water, displaces the water is the thought. But you want to give an adapter that you've cleaned enough time to dry. Of course, the denatured alcohol or isopropyl alcohol is not going to conduct, and it'll go through and just evaporate away after you've gone through and used it for cleaning. Um, there's some other tools out there, and I probably need to get some spray like the deoxit and just to see how much better that those do. The um, the original adapter, I did clean it because it beyond the dusting, it had that foam, and the isopropyl alcohol goes through and does cut this foam stuff pretty good. So I'll go through later on and use that to clean a little bit more of the drive cage and things like that. Get the major mass of this foam that's just dropped here, and then get in there with just some paper towels with the isopropyl alcohol. And then I didn't have to clean very much on the adapter of the second Model 60. This will be an easy. This will be easy enough to test the way it is as well. I went through and dusted it and just did a general purpose cleaning. And it's just that I'm most interested in this particular adapter on since it had the most damage and things like that. And I looked over with the magnifiers to see if, of course, examining my clean job on the adapter I'm about to test that had the most damage, but also looking at the board that just is bad. And I'm not able to see anything on the chip leads or anything else. Everything looks good otherwise. Normally I'd go through if I were to troubleshoot this, which I'll certainly go to another level with it too, is I would replace the crystal on there first, because these things can get knocked around and quit working. They're the most sensitive component. There's a crystal here and a crystal here, and I would go through and replace those. Is a common troubleshooting step. And so let's go through. Let's get the the adapter that I've tested previously. This is a known good condition, and I'll get this back to where this adapter came from as a replacement. It's a working good replacement. And let's go through. I do need to dust inside this unit a little bit too. You don't want to have the dust build up too much. And it just looks like just dust in this unit. Doesn't look like too much more damage. And the thing on these, especially with where the adapters are in this horizontal position, is you don't want any brackets left off the back, so where the bugs can get in. Even mice can get in those openings. That's just, they get inside and they just wreak havoc ultimately on these. So I've got everything fired up otherwise, turned on, connected, and I'll get switched over to the video capture it at this point. And so let's get the internal webcam on so people can see me on the machine, at least see my back. And we will get, I'm shooting the remote through a little bit of a slit there as far as I scooted the Model 60 case back in there a little bit further than what it was previously. Everything's still connected up on the Model 60, of course. Okay, good. We didn't get any hard drive errors that came up. We still don't have an autoexec.bat. So it is booting from that controller. We're going to go through. I'll probably not even have to switch scenes. Let's go through and let's pull this adapter. And I may go through and just work on a little bit more cleaning and other things for that adapter. It's not really necessarily a photogenic adapter. I wouldn't use it for the high resolution photos, which is what I would basically have my a spare adapter, as it were, that were outside a unit. I use those to go through and just to show, to take pictures of. And certainly this adapter I have marked as bad, that can probably be a very good demonstration or a picture subject because it looks visibly complete. Okay. And I'm aware that I didn't switch over to my camcorder view for this swap, but that's fine. There wasn't a really close-up view of me putting the adapter in place. And this is the adapter of the second Model 60. And of course, the drives are a lot more sensitive than these controllers. But we get this one that's booting as well. I don't know if ultimately the reason that the original controllers are not around anymore. It just seems like those are recalled with that known issue. And that's probably why there's not a whole bunch of those around, just being sensitive to that static damage. So the all the controllers I have, at least I know I have a known good spare. I know that the controller for my second Model 60 works. I don't know if the drive itself, is still good or not. The same condition that I told the guy that sent me this, the adapter that ultimately the controller that turned out to be bad, is that, well, at least we know that the adapter was bad. So having a good adapter, you're one step further to seeing that the drive is also good. It doesn't necessarily, you have the subsystem not work and you find a bad controller, it doesn't necessarily confirm that the drive is working in order, but hopefully that'll get him a step further, and I'll be able to go through and mark these boards as, hey, I've got this is good. I can go through and troubleshoot that that board up by probably just replacing crystals. I don't see any thought of me going in and replacing chips or anything else. I don't really have a source. If I had two bad adapters, I could go through and make educated guesses on what part of the controller was bad on one. Hopefully, they would have different bad parts that I could swap. But that's not the instance in this case. I mean, as long as I have one spare controller for the working systems that I have, it's going to be more common in usage. Just the drive is going to fail. Now I'm going through and I'm looking at the time and the date. They're actually they're off from um in fact they're it's the same setting that I applied for the previous video of the time frame once I got through and powered the unit down. So that real-time clock battery, it's just barely hanging on. It's just barely hanging on for the configuration. It's just barely hanging on. It doesn't update the time and date and things like that when it's off. And I'll go through and kind of determine it's easy enough for me to build a ref disk that I have, even with the adapters that are in there. But I want to go through and I've got to get out a working diskette drive to prepare for that and get that new battery in place. And if the clock doesn't turn over, I mean, that can be a condition as well that something has failed on the planer. At least I have those spare MAL 60 planers as well. So I'll have, a working unit and make sure that the real-time clock is updating, the configuration is held with a new battery. And we're so much further in getting this system using as a test bed and making sure that everything works to it and archiving that hard drive data that looks so interesting to see this in future videos, catch that working as well. So if you enjoyed the video, go ahead and click on the like button, please. And as always, subscribe to my channel if you've not done so already. Recommend it to your friends so that they can subscribe too if they're interested in this sort of content. But this is IBM Museum. That's all I have for now. Thank you.